Hey guys and gals, welcome to part 3 in my video series on DIY dry aging. Links to all the videos in the series can be found in the description below, so make sure you check those out. I'd also encourage you to subscribe to my channel to be notified of future videos in the series. Alright, so in this video, we're going to be looking at a beef rib section from the time it goes into a dry ager that I built until the time that it comes out 25 days later. I remember when I did this for the first time, and I can imagine it's probably the same for you, I had all these concerns and questions about changes in color, changes in texture, and changes in aromas, right? And I was concerned. I don't know. I'm like, how can it be possible that you can put a hunk of meat in a refrigerator for an extended period of time and have it not turn into a science experiment, right? So, I don't know. Let's see what happens. Okay, well here we are. I've got the meat in the dry aging refrigerator, and I actually had to step away for a few hours and head off to dinner. And it's interesting. Here's the meat, and it's already started to change a little bit, which I find to be pretty interesting. You know, probably it's just gotten a bit drier, is what I would say. But anyhow, it's looking good. The temperature was down to a nice chilly 2 degrees C before I open the refrigerator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this here, and I'm going to check in on it every once in a while, probably every few days or so. And I'll add some time-lapse photos, and then I'll do another video when we actually pull this out, carve into it, and grill it up. Alright, so here we are at day 0. This is immediately after I put the beef into the dry ager. And take note here of the color, the texture, and you can kind of see how the meat is glistening to get some indication of how moist it is. Alright, so check this out. After just the 5th day, I feel like we can already see dramatic changes in the way the meat looks. Now, unfortunately, the lighting conditions weren't exactly the same on each of the days that I took a picture, but hopefully you still get a pretty good idea. We need to fast forward a bit to day number 17 because some of the pictures I took between this time and day 5 didn't come out properly. In any event, I would say around day number 10 is when I started to see these darker patches forming in certain areas of the beef. These are areas where a dry, hard crust had started to form. Okay, so I have to pause here for a second to say something. I have to admit that it was probably right around this time when the beef started looking a little weird and developing these colors that I really started asking myself if this was something I wanted to eat in the future. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that most people would probably agree that it isn't looking all that appetizing at this point. Now, of course, I did end up eating it, and it was fantastic. And we'll get into that a bit more in my next video when I pull the meat, slice off some steaks, cook them up, and do a taste test. Here's what it looked like on day 25. Now, in my view, I would say that the meat continued to get darker, particularly in those areas where the dark patches had already started to form. And overall, the meat continued to shrink in volume as additional moisture was drawn out of it. Okay. Now let's quickly switch between day 0 and day 25, then look at these days in the same frame so we can see just how dramatically the beef changes during this relatively short period of time. Because remember, a lot of people dry age their beef even longer than this. In fact, in a future video in this series, I put this particular rib section back in, age it further, and pull it again on day 33. At that time, I do a visual and taste comparison between it and an unaged steak that I cut off and froze the day that I purchased the beef. Now let's take a look at a few areas I wanted to highlight. Starting on the far left, just look at this area here where for whatever reason the meat seems to have darkened and shrunken the most. In comparing this area to the rest of the meat, I would have to attribute this to the fact that this area had more meat exposed to the elements and not protected by fat or bone. For example, if you look at this second area on top, you'll notice this section in the middle, which is well protected by the fat cap, seems to age the most
gracefully, shall we say. Coming up, we'll be looking at comparison shots from the top, and you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Other areas of interest are these interbone sections. They're protected by the fat cap on top, but nothing protects them on the bottom side. I bring all of this up because it's my understanding that when you're in the market for a rib section to dry age, you want to make sure you get one with the fat cap intact. Otherwise, at the end of your aging, you'll find yourself with a lot more wasted meat. Finally, I just wanted to drive the point home by looking at this area here. To me, it looks like we've got ourselves some tasty-looking beef jerky forming in this sort of cliffhanger section. Alright, now let's go ahead and take a look at some shots of the beef from the top. Try to take note of the changes in the particular areas we talked about previously. Then we'll do a comparison, this time showing day 5 and day 25 in the same frame. Alright, enough of that nonsense. Let's take a look again at a few areas of interest. First of all, check out this area on the far left. There's a small section here where we clearly see an area where meat was completely unprotected by the fat cap and fully exposed. It's pretty clear that this juicy bit of beef that had so much potential in its youth has been reduced to shriveled up, wasted crust by day 25. In this PSA, I urge you not to let this happen to your beef. Frankly, about all you can do is when picking out your rib section, just try to get one that's as protected with a fat cap as possible. And finally, here are a couple of other areas on top where the fat cap was thin and the underlying beef dried a bit more than in other areas. Alrighty guys and gals, so that just about wraps up this video. However, I did want to comment on one thing that I've gotten a lot of questions about, and that is the aromas that you might encounter on your dry aging journey. So, for me, when I first put the beef into the fridge, I would say there was nothing unique about the smells. You know, it would kind of be the same thing like if you went down to the grocery store and you bought a steak and you unsealed it. You know, it was that fresh, beefy kind of smell. Well, that was over a few days. That was replaced definitely with something else. And it was like kind of a sharp, kind of a cheesy smell, you know. And naturally I got concerned. I'm thinking, well, this is something I'm probably going to try eating in the future. And also I'm thinking, well, I spent like $300 on this 25-pound hunk of beef, and it would kind of stink if, no pun intended, if it went bad, right? And then it's just $300 down the drain. But naturally I persisted, and everything was fine. So I would say that by the time I pulled the beef, or even shortly before that, there were no off-putting smells whatsoever. And I would attribute that to several things. First of all, in my design, I had baking soda in the fridge, and I think one very unique design element was the use of a UV sterilizer that I came up with. I would definitely invite you to check out my design walkthrough because I go through that element in particular. Anyway, in addition, I would say, I think that you could probably agree with me that in your life experience, things that are moist just tend to give off a bit more aromas, right, than things that are dry. So naturally, as this beef dries, it develops as crust, it's just gonna give off less smells. Alright, so that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please take a second to give it a thumbs up. At the moment, I have at least 2 other videos planned for the series, so make sure you subscribe to get notified of those. Until then, happy dry aging, and I'll catch you on the next one.